thousand stories of what they think you're like, but I've heard the tender whisper of love in the dead of night, and you tell me that you're pleased and that I'm never alone. You're a good, good father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. Oh, I've seen many searching for answers far and wide, but I know we're all searching for answers only you provide, 'cause you know just what we need before we say a word. You're a good, good father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You're a good, good father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. Oh, it's love so undeniable. I can hardly speak. Peace so unexplainable. I can hardly think as you call me. Deeper still as you call me. Deeper still as you call me. Deeper still into love. Love as you call me. Deeper still as you call me. Deeper still as you call me. Deeper still into love. Love, you're a good, good father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You're a good, good father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You're a good, good father.
Old things have passed away. Your love has stayed the darkest nights. For all that you've done, we will pour out our love. This will be our anthem song. Jesus, we love you. Oh, how we love you. You are the one our hearts adore. Jesus, we love you. Oh, how we love you.
Good morning. I wouldn't normally just read off a script, but I have to because otherwise I'm going to just waffle. I did this at our wedding. I wrote this amazing speech to talk all about Tim, and then I just went off-piste and it was awful. So please, I do apologise if I'm just reading off this. But so Happy New Year, and I love this first Sunday of the year. It feels so full of possibilities and opportunity. And whether or not you make New Year's resolutions, there's always that sense of anticipation and of a fresh start. This is the first year ever that I haven't spent New Year's Eve taking down all the Christmas decorations that we spent hours putting up a few weeks ago. But there's always this urge of something new, of clearing things away and getting rid of all the clutter. So I feel it's a real privilege to speak to you, and I really do hope that what I say has some relevance to you. I wouldn't call it a sermon. It's more of a testimony of what God's been doing in me over the last few years, and a chance to share with you some of the work that I've been doing as well with Walk Through the Bible. And so when I was trying to write this, in my mind, I thought this was about the last 18 months. And then the more I dug deeper, the more I found actually it's been about 6 years of work that God's done in me since I went back to work after having Oakley. So first of all, I'm going to just share a little bit about what God's done in me. Then I'm going to talk a bit about Walk Through the Bible, and then hopefully how that applies to us as well. So the work that God's been doing in me seems to have come to a conclusion over the last few months since the summer, but I know that really it started after maternity leave. So the journey for us to become parents was not straightforward. There was a lot of heartache involved. And so when Oakley finally arrived, we knew that God had blessed us with something and someone incredibly special. And in the years leading up to the fulfilment of this promise that God had made to Tim and I years previously, I kind of threw myself into work. I think Tim and I both did. And we pushed ourselves to be the absolute best we could be, to make a difference to the people around us, especially in the schools we worked in. But without meaning to, this became my identity. So all the heartache, the longing to become a parent, I channeled all that energy and effort into becoming really successful as a leader and as a teacher. And that brought loads of recognition and respect from other people. And that became a very big part of who I was. Now, I don't think that that is wrong. I don't think that wanting to use our God-given talents and gifts is wrong. And I don't think that success or doing well is something to avoid, because it says, it does work, in Colossians 3:23, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters. And that's what both Tim and I have always sought to do. But the success and the praise became part of how I saw myself. Being at the very heart of a school which was serving its community very successfully, being known for the work that I was doing, it all became one of the main parts of my identity. So when we then became parents and I took a year of maternity leave, it was more than just a little shock to return to the same school. But instead of being at the very heart of it, I was a one-day-a-week cover teacher. I had no particular responsibility for decision-making. I had no title. If you could put a sort of a hierarchy of a school, I was very much at the bottom. And it wasn't long before I realised that basing my identity on a job description or success was rather fleeting. So I felt led to go to a different school where people didn't know me as a leader, to try and make a new start. Now, I'm very fond of moving furniture around. I like clearing away clutter. I like having tidy spaces. But big changes like moving jobs or going to a new school or making new friends are way out of my comfort zone. So moving to a new school has always been really challenging for me. But I knew that it was God's plan to do that. So I moved to this other school, and it was a church school. Absolutely wonderful to be working in a church school setting. Daily prayer, sung worship, they weren't just things that we did, it was expected. And I was reprimanded for not praying 3 times a day with my class. So it was a completely different environment to be in. There was freedom. We read the Bible all the time. We had class sets of Bibles. Everybody prayed all the time. And so at least in theory, Jesus was very much part of everything that went on in that school. And in every single room, it's not that one, Every single room at that school has the quote from 1 Corinthians 16 verse 14 that says, "Let all that you do be done in love." And when I left that school a few weeks ago, the children quoted at me. They were like, "Whatever you do, Mrs. Paternoster, let all you do be done in love, and Jesus will go with you, he'll go before you." They knew all of these things. So I went, and that sense of Christian distinctiveness was really tangible in what was being said. But in those 4 years, I've never had my teaching ability or my character challenged more. And I know that it's been God reminding me that my identity is more than me as a teacher. But like in all situations, if we don't get the message first time, then we have to keep going through it again and again until we learn the message that God's trying to give us. And a friend of Tim and ours gives an analogy of climbing a mountain, that if we want to move further with God and move up the levels of spiritual maturity, we first have to grasp certain truths about God and who we are in him. And if we don't learn them, we go round the mountain until we get a chance to learn the thing again, until we get it. So I haven't fully learnt this yet, and it's a good challenge for all of us as we start a new year. Who are you? Is your security about yourself in the role that you have at work? Is it a position that gives you authority and power? Is it what other people think of you? And we like to say no to that one, but I know that for me, that's a huge issue. Not so much about what people say about my appearance, because thankfully teenage years have gone, but more about what people say about me as a person. And my 4 years at the school I've just left have been really hard. It's a wonderful school, wonderful people, wonderful children, fabulous parents, and I'm really thankful that God prompted me to go there. But I have never felt so worthless as a teacher as I have over the last few years. Now, it would be really easy, and I have done this, to attribute that to certain people and hold a grudge against them. But reflecting on this, I know that God has orchestrated certain things to bring me to a point where I have to face them. And I think in our lives, it's very easy when we go through difficult challenges to put the blame on someone and hold a grudge against them and to hold that against them. But actually, it's God just prodding us and wanting us to learn something. And it reminds me of Donkey from Shrek, who says it's a little bit like peeling an onion, that layer by layer, God has been peeling off my identity of who I think I am. It's not in success. It's not in all these things. And finally, he's had to peel off the layer that it's not me as a teacher. Now, if someone asked me what I wanted to be when I was older, I always knew it was a primary teacher. And I have to say, initially, it's because of Sharon. Because when I was a teenager at a youth group at Thorpe Baptist, she's just said, "Oh, you'd be a really good teacher. You should be a teacher." And it just stuck. And it was as if God was just going right deep of, yes, that's what I want you to do. And that dream has dictated every single decision for my future from around the age of 14. So all my GCSE options were chosen to help me to then choose the right A-levels, to then go to the right university. And while my sixth form friends were reading magazines in the common room, my go-to book was the UCAS directory. And genuinely, you could find me sitting on top of a filing cabinet reading the UCAS directory, trying to find the best place to go in the country to study education. And again, I don't think any of this is wrong. I think that having a sense of purpose and direction is great. And I know that God directed my path throughout my life. That sense of vision and clarity of purpose kept the teenage version of me on track. And it says in Proverbs 29 that where there is no vision, the people perish. And I know that God gave me a vision for what he wanted me to do with my life, and that allowed me to keep focused and not get distracted. But the problem for me has come when I've become so fixated on that vision that I've forgotten to listen to what God is saying in the midst of it. Because so much of my identity and how I saw myself has been centred on me as a successful teacher, when someone questioned that, probably with the intention of making me better, I fell apart. The minute I couldn't do something perfectly or get a little bit of recognition for doing something well, I was a mess. And the number of times Tim has found me come home and he says, "How was your day?" and I just cry. It's all because I've lost sight of who I am in God. And I believe that the lack of resilience over the last 4 years has been because I was used to being successful and believed that I could do all of that in my own strength and my own ability. And I've forgotten to give God glory for the talents he'd given me and wanted the praise for myself. Now, I need to share with you that teaching and working in schools is really hard right now. I can only talk about primary schools and my own experiences, but I checked yesterday. There is a Facebook page called Life After Teaching, Exit the Classroom and Thrive. And as of yesterday, it had 110,000 members just in this country. So the fact that 110,000 people are so unhappy that they want to join a Facebook group, that they will thrive when they leave the classroom, makes me think it's not just me. The job that I trained in and I loved is now so far removed from the reality of many classrooms that there is a major teaching crisis in this country right now. The expectations being placed on teachers and support staff is crazy, and the support being given, both financially and in terms of numbers of people in the classrooms, is being reduced. And it's really complex. If someone says to me, why have you left teaching? I can't really give a very straightforward answer. But I believe that at the very root of it is that comparison is really core in teaching. Anyone who works in a school will know that every observation, inspection, performance management review, they all centre themselves around comparing ourselves to a set of standards, to another member of staff, to a set of data about how well your class are performing in comparison to an obscure measure that children should be at a certain point at a certain time. And this quote has really spoken to me over the last few years. Comparison is the thief of joy. And I believe that you can compare yourself to others to push yourself forwards. That can be really wholesome, and it can lead you to hold yourself to account to other people. But unfortunately, the way it's often done in the education world can lead to feelings of inadequacy, and that the best you have to offer isn't quite good enough. There's a really growing home education community in this country right now, as many families are feeling the same as the teachers, that this one-size-fits-all approach doesn't fit. Now, this is a little bit out of date, and I know it's really small, but it just shows the number of pupils to teachers across Europe. This is in secondary schools. And the pink is the absolute highest, it's saying 26 pupils. I actually think that's quite low. I don't work in a secondary school, but primary schools we have 32, and it's usually one of us. But you can just see how that compares across Europe. Now, this is a massive issue. I don't want to get political, but it's just to demonstrate that actually right now, we need to pray for our schools and our school staff. Teachers know what the problems are, but they're not always allowed to fix them. And this made me laugh. It's a little bit ironic because it's about well-being, teacher well-being. It's written by Ofsted, and anyone who works in schools, Ofsted are usually the cause of well-being problems and anxiety issues. But they were tasked to create a well-being report about teachers. And so this says, according to the UK's Health and Safety Executive, teaching staff and education professionals report the highest rates of work-related stress, depression and anxiety in Britain. It came as no surprise then that when Ofsted asked teachers to contribute ideas for our research programme, teachers overwhelmingly wanted us to research teacher stress, workload and well-being. And the reason I've shared this with you is because I really would ask that you pray for God's vision for schools in this country right now to come to pass, because the people making the decisions are not making the right decisions. And again, politics shouldn't really come into this. We just pray for God's vision. I'd ask that you pray for strength and wisdom for those on the ground and for those making decisions. Pray for mental and physical resilience for those who remain in the classrooms, as it's a tough place to be. We know of marriages that are being broken, physical health being pulled apart, and the mental health and well-being of teaching staff is at breaking point. So in your prayers this week, please do lift up schools. I don't think we need the answers. I think we just need to pray for God to have his way. So I'm going to get rid of that slide because that's really depressing. We'll just put this one on for now. So that leads me to share what's been going on over the last few months. There have been significant challenges for our family, but that's not my story to tell. But God has made it clear to me that I need to be more present for Oakley and for Tim. Just linking to the teaching thing, most of the time, the stress is sort of at the teacher level. Most teachers do a really good job of shielding that from the children. And I know that's not the case in all schools, but I do believe that a lot of teachers act as a bit of a firewall for their students, and that they take on that stress and anxiety as much as they can. But yeah, I felt very much I need to be more present for Oakley. He's at school, and for Tim, who's also working at a school. Even doing 2 days a week teaching has taken up so much of my brain space that it's hard to then be fully me, even on the days when I'm not in school. And there are people who manage this perfectly well, but for us, a change had to happen. Now, I know that some people say you should knock on doors to see which one's open, and this may well work for some people, but I felt God telling me to wait. I was desperately unhappy, but I didn't have the yes that I wanted to walk away. And I suppose in some situations, knocking on a door to see which one might open can work, but there are times that if you knock hard enough, you're going to bash the door down, it'll open anyway. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to wait until God showed me which door to knock on. And I was reminded of this verse in Genesis 12, verse 1, when God told Abraham to take his family and leave. The Lord said to Abraham, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you." He didn't tell Abraham the whole journey. He just did that first step. And I like to have step-by-step instructions for the next 5 years. I want to know, before I do something, what's going to happen, all laid out nicely. And Tim and I, if we're going to make a plan, we have an itinerary, and we, like at one point, he had spreadsheets for practically every decision that we had to make. We like order, we like structure. And yet this example shows us that very often that's not how God works. He just tells us to go, then fills in the rest later. Until we've reached the point where the next step has to come, then he'll tell us what's next. So I knew for a while that my time at school was coming to an end, but I had nothing else to go to. So I tried to orchestrate a few jobs for myself, wrote out some amazing job descriptions and propositions. I put them all on paper with the hours I could work, what I would do, what my pay would be. I gave it to some local people. I was just so desperate to find something else, but obviously that didn't come to pass because it wasn't God's plan. He told me he wanted me to go, that he would lay out the path, but I had to trust him. But leaving a career that I'd worked my entire adult life for was not very easy to do. And at this point, this was in June, I'd missed the end of May deadline when I would have to give my notice to leave in the summer. There was no other potential job to go to. I knew God was calling me out of the classroom, and yet I had to go back in September to a job that I knew wasn't the right job for me. So nothing made sense, and I had no idea what God was doing at all. And then, like days after the deadline to hand my notice in, I had a message from Paul Keyes asking if I was free to go to lunch with him. And I was so cross because I just missed the deadline. I was like, why are you messaging me now? If you'd messaged me a week ago, this would be perfect. But it's all worked very well. So we met up and we talked about what Walk Through the Bible do in schools. And he asked for my opinion about it, what possible things I would do if I was going to add to their work. And it quite quickly turned into a sort of a job offer where he asked if I would take the lead on a project. And it was very clear in my spirit it was the right thing to do. Sometimes you just know when you're talking because physically it makes no sense because I had to still work at school, was overwhelmed by that, and he was asking me to then do another job at the same time. It was a one-off job. There was no permanent contract, but it was right. And I'll tell you a bit more about that in a minute. So my heart, this was perfect, because it was a job that combined all the things that I love to do, but my head was screaming, what are you going to do when it finishes? You can't leave a job and then have nothing to go to. This is a secure job with brilliant pay. Doesn't make any sense. And then when Paul started to explain a little bit more, this combination of understanding primary school curriculum, planning, teaching, a little bit of children's TV presenter, a bit of marketing, some conversations with leaders. It was as if all of the things that I love to do had all been put into one job. And all of a sudden, all the job descriptions that I'd written and sent out to people were a little bit embarrassing because it clearly wasn't what God had in mind. So, Walk Through the Bible. So for over 25 years, Walk Through have been going into schools and delivering their children's versions of the adult programme, which is going through the stories of the Old and New Testament. It's still hugely successful, and over 1,000 schools each year access these. But when talking to teachers and school staff, about what they would like in addition to this, the overwhelming response was that schools wanted something that would fit with their curriculum a little bit more clearly. So the primary curriculum at the moment is so full, and the expectations on year 5 and 6 teachers at the end of primary school to get their students to meet age-related expectations is huge. So sometimes those lovely projects that primary school teachers used to do and wanted to put in, they just get squeezed out because there's no room. And so for us to get Walk Through to reach more children with the messages of the Bible, a different approach was needed. It doesn't replace anything that Walk Through is doing. It's just in addition. And Paul's brief to me was that he wanted a short, maybe 2-week project that taught the story of Easter. It needed to meet primary school objectives and include videos that we'd film in Israel. And so I went away and had a think, and it really quickly became clear that to do justice to the enormity of the Easter story, we'd need more than 2 weeks. So we put together a project that is in 4 sessions, from the very beginning of creation, where sin enters, through Christmas, where God begins the rescue plan of sending Jesus, and then ends with Holy Week, and what that means to humanity. Now, as a booklet, I'm going to share some pages of this, so Kai and Denise, do not tell Paul that I'm doing this, because this hasn't been printed yet, but I just want to show you, because so many people, when they ask about this project, they want to know what it is. So I've done it small, because you're not allowed to read it, because it's not been printed. But there's 70 pages of activities for children. The page on the left, there's an author called Andy Robb who does brilliant children's Christian books. And he has done little pictures for us and short snippets of the story. So when the children take this booklet home with them, they've got the biblical story of Easter in their hands, which was really important to have. And then there's some activities as well. You can see down the side the different sessions. So we're really, really pleased with it. And I know as a teacher, if someone said, hey, you can have this, I would be really pleased to have this resource. I'll leave this up because I know you can't read it, so it's fine. So this booklet, it's got 70 pages of activities and tasks. We all know by now the shocking statistics of how anxiety, depression and poor mental health in children is increasing. There are huge numbers of children right now who don't know what their purpose is. They don't know where their place is in the world. So this booklet tries to go through some of that as well. It teaches them the story. It teaches them all about Easter, but it tries to go a little bit deeper. And my prayer is that this project, with the activities and stories that children take part in and hear, will change their view of themselves, and that God's love for them will be shared and go deep within their hearts. At the moment, 15,000 copies of this resource have been signed up for, which means that 15,000 children will access this resource, and they'll hear the message of love and hope that God speaks to them. And so as this goes out in the weeks prior to Easter, please do pray that some of these truths will sink really deep. Many of these children are not in church schools, so this might be the first time that they hear the message of God's love for them and what Jesus did for us. And we can be very explicit with this in a church school, but in non-church schools, you have to be really careful. But Easter and salvation are part of the primary school RE curriculum. So there's a real good way in for us to use that. And we've had to be very careful. We don't talk about God's love for us in the book. It's God's love for humanity. But I'm really praying that this will hit a lot of children with God's love. There's also, so we're going off to Israel as a team in a few weeks, and we're going to film introductory videos along with interviewing some people, very familiar faces to the church, to be Mary and a Roman soldier, to give a different perspective. And it's such a privilege to be part of this and really exciting. But I do ask that you pray for Tim and Oakley as they're at home for 10 days, especially because one of the reasons I left teaching was to be more present, and I'm just swanning off to Israel for 10 days. So please do pray for them as well. And one of the things that teachers and school staff have been really amazed by is that this resource is absolutely free. They're all so surprised and shocked that an organisation would produce something and then just give it away for free to this number of people. So it's been amazing to share that the money that is raised from the adult Walk Through the Bible sessions, along with donations and support from church and friends, pays for this. And Paul specifically wants me to thank you as a church for the support that Frinton Gospel Chapel has always shown for Walk Through, especially financially and with prayer. And every time we talk about the funding, Paul always mentions the faithfulness of the chapel. So thank you so much for that. Now, if anyone would like to support this further, amazingly, it costs £3 for one child to receive it. And we've had to limit the 15,000 copies for financial reasons, because to find 15,000 times £3 is quite a big ask to find. So I'm going to go through this bit really quick, but there is a website, the Walk Through the Bible website, if anybody would like to donate. Most primary school classes are classes of 30. So it just gives you that idea that for under £100, a whole class of children could have this resource given to them. But I'm going to move that off because that's a bit embarrassing to have that up, isn't it? Oh no, actually no, I can't because that comes next. We'll leave that there. Take note of that website. But please do see me later if you feel led to donate, even if it's just a monthly giving, a one-off giving for a month. Please do let me know. So this is what I felt were the three things to take away from this, the very first day of 2023. So first of all, I felt that God has said, find your identity in him. Take some time to sit quietly in his company and just wait and ask God to reveal to you where you may have given that identity to other things. And I find sitting with a notebook and writing down what he tells us, or tells me, the words kind of just flow, and I look back and I think that has not come from me. We hear so often that God speaks through the Bible, through songs, through other people, and that they're all true, but my relationship with God involves hearing what he says from him. And so by sitting down and just waiting on him, that's an amazing thing to do. So I would encourage you, first of all, find your identity in him. Secondly, don't allow comparison to steal your joy and inner peace. Our confidence comes from the Lord, knowing who we are and whose we are. There's people around me who spur me on to be better and to be more Christ-like, but comparing myself, my home, my looks, my child, my relationships with others, comparing them to people I see online or in films doesn't lead to wholeheartedness. The only person I should be comparing myself to is Christ and those who spur me on to be more like him. And in this world we live in, I think whatever age we are, that comparison is huge. And it's a really dangerous thing to allow that comparison to come in and form who we are. And thirdly, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In Proverbs 3 verse 5, it tells us to do this. God gives us wisdom. He's blessed us with amazing brains and capabilities. I think it's wrong to deny the amazingness that God has created in humanity, but we shouldn't be trusting in that. Our understanding of his ways are not full, and trying to figure things out in our own strength is never going to lead to fulfillment. And the flip side of that, trusting in him isn't just sitting and letting the world pass you by and just letting it spin out of control around you as you just sit there saying you're trusting. I believe it's active. It's listening to him. It's talking with him. It's asking God what he wants to be for us right now. It's waiting until he says go and stopping when he says stop. And all of this relies upon us being able to hear his voice and separating that voice from the many others around us. So all of this, I'm talking to myself, I'm making myself vulnerable in front of you so that together we can all move forwards in the ways that God wants us to this year. Finally, when I was thinking about the last few months, I believe that God fully planned for me to go back to school in September and do a final term of teaching. There were many things that I was holding on to, probably grudges against a person at my school. And by going back after the summer, I was able to have the peace that the summer so often brings after the summer holidays. And it enabled me to have honest conversations with that person without anger and bitterness, and to share things in kindness rather than hostility, to make peace with people who, towards the end of a very busy term, things had gone quite wrong. And I didn't think that God wanted me to leave on that note. The class that I've left have reminded me of how much I do love teaching and what a privilege it is to educate and to show God's love to children. Rather than leaving somewhere angry or demoralised, God's grace has allowed me to leave with absolute peace that this is his plan, that he will make my path straight if I follow him. So I pray that we would all lean into what God is saying to us this year as individuals, to use Jesus' life and character as our comparison, to spur us on to be more like him and less like the world, and to trust what God says and to learn to recognise his voice more each day. And as we came into church, there was a song playing with the lyrics, and I was sharing with Simon earlier, I was trying to express quite how I was feeling about 18 months ago, and I couldn't. And then this song played, and it just expressed everything that I felt God was doing in me. So perhaps as we leave church after the final song, we could have that playing again. I would encourage you to listen to that and to hear what God is saying. Thank you so much.
The sound of his voice, and seas that are shaken and stirred can be calmed and broken from my regard. And through it all, my eyes are on you. And through it all, it is well. It is well with me. And far be it from me to not believe, even when my eyes can't see. This mountain that's in front of me will be thrown into the midst of the sea. And through it all, my eyes are on you. And through it all, it is well. And through it all, well, it is well. words.